Funny is, I don't know that Scott hits record. I don't think my socks show up on YouTube unless you're the one.
There you go. You
Oh,
can
okay,
blame
you
me.
ready?
I hit record. So for those that are watching this on YouTube, Matt Wheeler always has cool socks. So if you come and join us live when Scott is here, you'll see the socks. Apparently when I'm here, you see them anyway. So so show
Well,
your socks. Let's see
okay,
them.
okay. So the socks, these ones are fun. They're going to be really hard for me to show because they're actually
Reindeers.
Rudolph
Yes.
reindeer, right?
Yes.
And the
I love
nose,
it. The heel is the nose. Yeah.
yeah. And so then I started looking at it, and I'm looking at like this part, and this part, it could be a snowy sky, but I think it's like a snowy starlit sky, and Rudolph is flying through, right?
Yes, I see that
Like,
because I see at the top it's the same and I see Santa on top. So yeah, I agree with you.
yes.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so anyway, these are
So
some
for those of you looking at this on YouTube, yes, he really does this every time. So yes. So yeah,
uh, yep. So no, yeah, those are my Christmas socks. They're not narwhals, but
but now we know what a narwhal is. So
yeah,
yeah.
now we have a better understanding.
So
And those
somebody
of us
has
just joining have no idea what we're talking
yeah,
about.
exactly. So somebody has a question in the chat. So if you have questions, throw them in the Q&A at the bottom. We'd love that. But
Hey, we'll take it in the chat as well, wherever you
yes,
got to
we
throw.
will. We will. But I have enough ADHD that it's way easier for me to focus if I have it just in one place. So,
If you guys could
so
actually text them and email and chat and then Q&A, because Tammy does really good with all this.
multitasking.
Yes,
uh,
that's me being silly. Okay.
yes. So first of all, let's talk. Who are you? As my grandma would say, tell him she would walk us around town in Iowa, in a little tiny town in Iowa, and she'd say, tell them who you are and how old you are. We had to do that, my sister and I, all the time. So I won't make you tell how old you are, but
Yeah.
tell us about who you are.
Who I am. So I'm Matt Wheeler. I'm a licensed professional counselor. I practice at Family Strategies Counseling Center in Mesa, Arizona. I'm a certified sex addiction therapist. I have done a bit of training with emotionally focused couples therapy. And so I actually really love, even before I got into the profession, one of the things I was really excited about doing was figuring out how to help couples heal. And although some of my ideals have shifted, sometimes healing isn't always healing the coupleship. Sometimes that's not always possible, but I love helping couples work through trials and difficulties, even if that's caused by trauma in the relationship. So when I was originally approached to do the webinar, for me, it was, oh, I want to do couples because I love couple stuff. And so, yeah, I will talk. You can ask me any questions about addiction and relationships. And I will do my best to answer. I'm pretty open. I'm not afraid to even share some about what works for me in my life and how it shows up. Because one of the things I find really interesting, and I don't know why I'm going off on this, I think sometimes people think that therapists like have it all figured out, and I joke with people all the time, like my life is just as messy as yours, right? In the sense that I have to figure out how to live all the principles that I'm teaching my clients as well. And every good therapist has their own therapist, and so
Yes, yes. I love that. Thank you. Yeah.
and so the truth is, there's a lot of things that I speak to that is from personal experience, that from clinical experience. We're all in this together, just trying to figure out how to be happy and healthy in our lives. And every marriage has issues. Sometimes I think there was a fantasy in my head, even at times, that maybe I'd be happier if I had married somebody different. And that fantasy just doesn't work ever. And I say that my wife knows that I love and adore her, and all things are good. But so let's jump in and talk
Well,
couples
I
with.
want to tag on to what you said too, because
Okay, tag on.
like I wish that like, after you get to a certain place in recovery, then you're zen and you have it all together. And like, oh, that's also behind me. And what I have found, particularly, in this year, is everything I learned early in recovery is everything I have to lean into yet. It's not one of those where, I mean, do I do it better? Do I have to do it faster? Sure, but it still is all the principles that I learned, early on. And even when you're talking about, marriages are messy, relationships, it doesn't
Oh,
matter if it's, a work colleague, if it's an in-law, I mean, whatever it is, even best friends, those are, it's complicated. The only way to not be encumbered by that is to be unto ourselves, and that's a really horrible idea. That didn't work for me either. So
no, it doesn't.
yeah.
No, yeah, relationships are messy. Life is messy. And I mean, the one thing we can talk about too is even relationships with kids, right? Because the truth is that kids are tough. And the number of times I've had to hire a therapist to help me with my kids, and the therapist might teach something that's the exact same that I'm trying to teach my kid, and my kid will listen because it's somebody other than their dad.
You know what? Even I hate to tell you this, but even adult children don't always do exactly what you want them to do. So like, just saying.
No,
Sometimes you have to just go,
it's so funny
I'm
because
here for you.
Kim, who Kim tells me all the time. She's like, "Hey, it's almost harder when they're adult children," and
Yep.
so
Yeah.
yeah, no, I don't know that I'm certainly not. I used to think, oh, things will be better when. I used to
Yeah.
have that faulty core belief going in my head, and learning to enjoy the moment and be present, even if it's difficult, has taken a lot of work.
Yeah. Yeah. So the first question is, any tips to help stop my future tripping? My husband is doing amazing in recovery and doing all right things, but I can't stop thinking about the what ifs. What if I would have not caught him when I did? How much worse could it have gotten, etc.?
Yeah. Is it? I think it's a great question. Um, I've always loved the term future tripping. It's so funny. Years ago, I would have said, "I have no idea. What advice do you have for me?" Because I've always been a future tripper. I think it depends, obviously, on your resources, in the sense that. I would bring that up with your therapist as well. Having a good friend who can walk you through all of that can work really well. Journaling those, I think it's good to journal it. Go ahead and play it out. What if you hadn't? What if you hadn't caught him when you did? Because the truth is that 6 months before that, you hadn't caught him when you did, and so did that significantly change the current outcome of catching him, right? So if you hadn't caught him when you did, you would have caught him later on. And that maybe you say, well, that's not guaranteed. Okay, so what if? What if you didn't catch him? Where would that put you right now? How were you doing before when you didn't know, when you hadn't caught him? So sometimes playing out those what ifs and kind of examining those scenarios. Now, be honest with yourself that there's probably some underlying issue that's there, meaning uh, you're playing with, well, if I hadn't, that would be terrifying. And it might be, well, if I hadn't, does that mean maybe I still haven't caught something? And so we play with those what ifs to try and manage that underlying emotion of fear or sadness or anger. And so we future trip to manage what we're feeling right now, but we make it about something that's far off in the future. So uh, learning to get present with what you're feeling now is really one of the best things we can do. So sure, journal it, talk about it with a friend, kind of explore the what ifs, just to allow yourself with somebody to challenge you a little bit, but then really pull back and ask yourself, okay, what if I sit with what I'm feeling right now? What am I feeling right now? What am I actually afraid of? You have probably heard this, but a philosopher once said, I think it's attributed to Confucius, but based on what I've found, it isn't Confucius, but or Tao, but it's the idea that anxiety is the fear of the future, depression is a fear of the past,
Mm.
and inner peace is found in the present. And so one of the best things that I've found, honestly, for my future tripping and what I teach clients all the time: do meditation, do mindfulness. Sometimes things like yoga can help a lot with meditation and mindfulness and learning to be present. Because really, you're just wanting to bring it to now. What is it that I need to feel now? Um, because all the what ifs are just stories, potential fantasies, and really just your fear. So how to,
And the fear is right. Yeah. I mean, it's I'm sure it absolutely, I was thinking, I bet it boils down to fear, it's like, and, but I was thinking about the now too. It's like, I've said this before to the serenity prayer I use as a mantra. What do I have control over? Nothing outside of myself. And like I hear there's, he's doing amazing in recovery. Like, wow, that is something to be grateful for. And
oh,
I
totally.
really, yeah, and I think, we talk in the recovery rooms, it takes what it takes, and 6 months ago, or 6 months before you had discovery, he might not have been ready. So like,
I love I love that you say that, and it actually wants me to back up to another piece, right? I
okay.
actually almost address this from the perspective of, well, if you can't use him as a support, here's where you can go with it. But the truth is, what if him doing amazing in recovery is actually allowing your fear to come out?
Oh,
And so what would it look like to actually go to him and say, hey, I realize that my future tripping, my what ifs, all of this stuff that I'm struggling with is my fear, and I'm wondering if you can help hold space with me. And if I come to you and talk to you about my what ifs, if I come to you and talk to you about my future tripping, can you just ask me questions? Can you just listen? Can you just hold space and tell me how scary that would be? Because what his oftentimes are his instinct probably is to defend himself, or to say, hey, I'm doing really good in recovery. So if he could learn, maybe he's listening right now, if he could learn to not try and convince you to think otherwise, he might actually help you with a lot of your fear just by learning to hold that space. And that's actually really what I would encourage here. I did say, hey, go to friends, process with your therapist. But the truth is, this is about couples. And Tammy helped bring that right back in. If he's doing amazing in recovery, oh my gosh, not only tell him that, but ask him, hey, I need you to do a favor for me. And I realize, own your future tripping as your struggle. And then ask if he can hold that space without trying to solve it, without trying to make it go away, and just to let you be scared, if that makes sense.
yeah, no, it does. And that would be a huge couple growth moment, I love that idea. So the next one is: the timeline for formal therapeutic disclosure driven by the SA and his therapist, or by the partner and her therapist? My SA's therapist is not giving a straightforward response when we are asking for a date and timeline.
That is such a good question, because I've been on both ends of that. If I'm working with a partner or if I'm working with somebody struggling with the addiction, and the answer is not straightforward, and that's where, I would love to tell you, oh, it's definitely driven by him. Well, it really depends. It depends on the need. So your need as the partner, if you have to set a hard date for some particular reason, because your own need for stability, or for your own personal recovery, you can certainly do that and set a hard date and say, I need it by this day and this time. The danger you run into with that is that I've worked with people struggling with addiction where it's taken me, how do I say this? Way too long to help them figure out how to give a proper disclosure. They aren't even able to be honest with themselves. And so the struggle you run into, and his therapist might be running into this, and obviously there's so many dynamics. Maybe his therapist isn't being as assertive as he needs to be. Maybe he isn't healthy enough, right? There's no way for me to know the dynamics, but there are so many dynamics that make it really muddy. So I think it's good for the therapist to say, hey, let's plan on this date and time, because I think you can do this in 3 months with where I'm seeing that you're at. Um, or nine, or a month away, or whatever it ends up being. But I have had times where we're a week out from the disclosure and we've had it scheduled for 3 months. And guess what? We're postponing it another month. And I hate doing it as a therapist. I hate doing it because I know that the partner has been suffering and waiting. And it's like, oh, good. This is sarcasm if you can't tell. But oh, good. One more thing to cause pain to the partner. It is excruciating. I hate it, but I would rather postpone it and get the partner what they need a month later than to do an incomplete disclosure with the person struggling with addiction not being ready to give that disclosure. So hopefully the two therapists, if it were me, I would be asking for a release between the two therapists, and those two therapists are coordinating so that your therapist is helping you, if it needs to be postponed, is helping you work through that, and his therapist is pushing to get that date, him to be ready at a closer date. So I'm saying him and her. Yes. Okay. It was a him and her situation.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, and and I was thinking while you're talking to it, like how scary it has to be, because now like the what ifs or why nots, so for this particular partner, why isn't he ready? Like, is
Oh,
he still
totally.
acting out, all of those type of things? So, but I if you have good professionals holding the space for both of you and supporting you, then getting a good result is, more probable. So following their guide, but leaning into the support that your therapist is giving you. But I hate when I hear, that partners have had, 4 disclosures, and,
Oh,
he's still acting out, or B, he never was fully truthful, and there was a whole bunch of stuff, that was, kept being uncovered, and, like that is just, so painful. So, if you can just hang in there and get it to the right spot, then, the statistics are all that, a well done formal disclosure, is painful, but it's also part of the healing process.
right. I'm trying to remember what the statistic was. It was 90 or
Yeah,
92%
it was over 90%. Yeah.
of formal disclosures, when essentially done properly by therapists who have been trained to do it, that patients or clients will say that it was a positive, well worth experience, right? And so, well, that, I mean, shoot, 92%, whatever it is, that's huge, right? So that's what we're going for. You do it wrong and it's guaranteed trauma. You've already had trauma in your disclosure. And I don't want to guarantee there's trauma in the disclosure, but most likely there's already been some type of trauma in disclosure, just in the sense of discovery or an unhealthy disclosure, death by 1,000 cuts or whatever it might be. And so rushing disclosure it's a really delicate thing, but I don't blame you for being frustrated that how much longer do I have to wait? And that's the tough part in the beginning of recovery, is the partner really feels like, wow, more pain because I have to wait because the person who's struggling with the addiction still can't show up for me. So it's so painful to watch that happen, but hopefully the therapist can work together and really push that along.
Yeah, I agree. So, this is in the Q&A. My husband acted out with cyber sex affairs and
Porn, I think.
porn. Yes, thank you. I was like, Poen. It's Friday afternoon. I'm sorry. For 13 years, he attends group couples therapy and 12 steps, but is not working the steps. Yeah, that's my I'm warming a seat at the meetings, but I'm not really doing anything. So,
Yeah.
I'm in therapy, good, and also attend groups. It has been 18 months since I discovered this, disclosure. Last night he said he did all of this because he was bored. He said, "I am not to blame for any of it." And he is in denial, or is he still trying to control? No, certified sex addiction therapist is part of this, so.
Oh, okay. Um, let's see here. If we're gonna break this down. So I'll tell you what I often see in when recovery happens, the partner generally is gung ho, like, oh man, let's jump in. What books are we gonna read? Stereotypically, right? They're the ones that is often driving the recovery process. Once again, it is not fair, it is not just, but unfortunately, this is just what I tend to see. And so, you jumping in, you finding healing, you having a better idea for um, what the recovery process looks like in this case for him is really normal, right? You can see so much clearer. Here's the things that you need to be doing. Here's the things that would help me feel safe. And for a while early in recovery, that where we hope that the person struggling with addiction will get that spark where it's no longer I'm doing this because I don't want to lose my partner. um, and you're right. There's a lot of times they're at the 12 steps, and I have partners who are just like praying that some miracle happens or that somehow there's a rock bottom, as it's often referred to where that light switch happens and the individual wakes up and starts to work recovery on their own. As far as being in it 18 months, man, for him. So first of all, you might go to him and say, "Hey, thanks for being honest that you feel that you did this because you were bored." Right? What I hear there is he's saying, "I'm not an addict." Now, I have clients that I've worked with where I'm able to assess and figure out, are they an addict? Are they just abusing the behavior or the whatever the issue is, right? Sometimes we have people who have what we refer to as a moral incongruence, right? They have unhealthy behavior, looks a lot like addiction, but it's a lot of shame and moral incongruency, and what they're doing is totally wrong, totally unhealthy, but maybe they aren't at the level of an addict, right? Well, a good therapist is going to assess, because treatment for that may look different. However, I have a hard time believing that he has the ability to assess that properly. And so, getting in to see a certified sex addiction therapist would be potentially beneficial for that. But the fact that he's being honest, man, I would go to him. Hey, I really appreciate your honesty. It was painful to hear because this is what you've been sitting on for the last 18 months. To tell me that, let's see, he's not to blame for any of it.
No, he said, "I am not to." Oh, wait, I guess I was thinking, "I'm not to blame." I was thinking he was telling her that she's not to blame for any of it. He is in
If,
denial. So,
if he was saying
oh,
that,
that's interesting.
right,
I didn't
if
read it
he's
the other
saying
way.
if he's saying that you're not to blame, well, that's great. If he's saying that he isn't to blame, that worries me, because without responsibility, without accountability, without ownership, and I'm big on ownership. I'm big on accountability and responsibility, but I'm big on it for everybody, right? I've talked on here at this point probably a year ago where I talked about the parent-child relationship within couples, especially in addiction, where we need a peer-to-peer relationship where we're equal and we give to each other equally, even if the way we give to each other is different. And oftentimes, with somebody struggling with an addiction, they don't know how to be a peer. They don't know the skill set, unfortunately, how to have an open, honest, equal relationship. And so they automatically go to the child role. not taking responsibility, not taking ownership, not being accountable, well, then a partner in that moment, if you have a peer that's not stepping up, we then often go into a parent role. We don't, it's not like we think about this, but we go into a parent role trying to take control. Hey, here's what you need to do. You need to read this book. You need to go to your 12 step, because we see more clearly you're not doing well. You need to step up and be healthier. Well, what that does is just continues the cycle of, well, fine, you don't treat me like an equal. Keep in mind, they're not acting like an equal. You don't treat me like an equal, so I'm going to get my power back some other way. So they try to take dominance in the relationship. They try to take control. They hide things. They get manipulative, whatever else. We are confused. Why are you doing this? Why are you betraying me? Right? And so then we maybe pull back and try to offset that dynamic, but the loop just continues, right? So for depending on what he was saying there, I would even just honor him for being honest that he doesn't believe he's an addict, that whether he's not to blame, that part makes me nervous, and that, hey, I'm glad you're realizing that you're not taking any responsibility. I want to know more about why you feel like you're not to blame. Who is to blame? Tell me more. Now, be careful. He might say it's all your fault, right? And you got to hold that space and go, okay, wow, you really are struggling to take responsibility because you don't want to feel bad about what you've done. As far as trying to take control, yeah, that's one of the unfortunate things about somebody that's in an unhealthy space like that. So I don't know if this answers your question. This does give us an opportunity to kind of explore and talk about some of the dynamics that are happening, though. So let me know.
Yeah, and I look at this and I go, it's so sad. So Kristen Snowden does a webinar on Wednesday. This is the second week of the month, and she has a new book, Life Anonymous, and it's the 12 steps for those who are not addicts. And so I'm like, even if he doesn't perceive that he's an addict, he's not doing life well. And we all can learn from the 12 steps. They're great living tools. And clearly he hasn't lived in a most congruent and helpful way. I mean, he's lied to himself and you, but let's just start, he's lied to you. He's living, he's doing, he's bored. So rather than having a conversation with you and going, I'm bored, we should plan a vacation, or we, could play Yahtzee together. I mean, whatever, instead of I could join a book club,
rather than
I'm going to watch porn.
Taking ownership of, I haven't figured out how to meet the deficit that I have going on here. So I chose an unhealthy outlet to try and meet the deficit. And because I chose that unhealthy outlet, it hurt you and it hurt me and it hurt our relationship. And I'm sorry. I don't think I'm an addict. Let's say that that's the route that is right. And so I want to explore meeting my needs in healthy ways, right? But if it's, well, I don't need 12 step, and I was just bored, and so I'm quitting 12 step, and I don't need to go to therapy, and I don't need to do any of this stuff, so I'm going to sit at home and watch TV. Oh, okay. So basically you're not taking ownership of anything, and you're not owning how to grow up and be a healthy adult. And I'm not trying to shame anybody when I say that. I'm saying you can't veg out and numb through life and expect to feel happiness or joy or connection with other individuals. But if he's saying I was bored, well, interestingly enough, what research have you done on boredom? There's some research lately that's been showing that boredom and loneliness are almost the same thing, right? And it's up in the air, but consider that if I'm bored, if at a minimum, my brain isn't being occupied. So what do I need to do to occupy my brain? Do I need to go back to school? Do I need to pick up a healthy hobby? Do I need to figure out how to engage better with my children or my wife or my family? What am I going to do to take ownership for the boredom, right? Kids can come to us and say, Mom, Dad, I'm bored. And parents often say, well, if you're bored, I'll give you a chore. And I don't know that that's always the best thing to do, right? The kid is actually coming and saying, I'm bored. Can you help me figure out how to occupy my lack of stimulation and possibly my loneliness. I want to connect with you. And so he might be coming to you saying, I'm bored. Well, he's an adult and should probably buy a book on boredom and how to resolve it and read that book instead. So somebody can tell me they're not an addict, and then my response is, great. Show me how to repair the deficit that you had. Show me how you're going to step up and figure out how to live life. So go buy, if you're going to get Life Anonymous and do the 12 steps, because life is hard for everybody. If you're going to get a different book and explore to me, with me and us together, how to heal those deficits and live differently. My issue is how you lived and how you treated me and how you treated our marriage. So if you can live differently, I don't care if you call yourself the unicorn of the sea and that was your issue. I'm sorry, I had to go to the back to
That
the
was cute.
right? I don't care what you call yourself. Don't call yourself an addict, but heal your life. Take responsibility and heal your life. So I don't know if this is too much of a rant or a beatdown. I'm getting the thumbs up from Tammy, right? This is that moment where I push people. Great. Show me how you can learn to be accountable. If you've struggled to figure out how to be an adult, if you've struggled to figure out how to grow up because of your trauma, because of your abuse, because of your crappy parents when you were a kid, and this is what I tell everybody, you can't blame other people for how you choose to live right now. You can tell people, this is what has hurt me. This is where I'm stuck. You can say I need help, but ultimately I have to take accountability and responsibility for my happiness. No one else can ruin my life but me. So that's what I throw out there. Hopefully that helps. Tell me what
Yeah.
thoughts and questions you
Well,
have.
I want to talk about, and you talk about boredom, and what does porn do? It's nonstop images. It's the, bang, bang,
Nonstop
bang, 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 dopamine.
stimulation.
Yeah. So then nothing in real life compares with that.
Yeah,
So reading a book on boredom is like boring because I'm constantly looking. I have no attention span because I'm constantly looking for bang, 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 bang. So it's unfair. But it's also this artificial and, like you said, numbed out. So you're disconnected. You're all alone. You're looking at a screen. Looking at images and it's body parts and whatever. I mean, it's nothing real and meaningful. And at the end of the day, at the end of life, it's just images flashing by. So
totally.
it's unfortunate. But I love the rant. It was really good. So
Was it good and timely? Like I actually
yes.
have a ton of compassion for people struggling with addiction, and when I wouldn't necessarily throw that down at them, because you're gonna run into a ton of defensiveness on their part when you throw it out maybe in the way that I did. And so you have to learn to lean in with those concepts and explore with them, maybe with a little less intensity that I had. But part of me wanted you to know that you have every right to be frustrated. Part of me wants you to know that you have every right to feel hurt and angry, and that the accountability lies with them, and it's not your issue. Now, the next question, I don't know if we want to dive there, really does go into what is your accountability as a partner. But I don't know, were we
Yeah,
done with
no,
that?
and I was going to say, just put the video on. This video will be on sexandrelationshiphealing.com, and you can just put the video on. You don't even have to say anything. So, okay. So the next question is, what does healthy recovery look like for a partner? My husband is doing well in recovery right now, over 90 days of sobriety, and our relationship is improving.
I love it. First of all, I would throw out there that healthy recovery for you looks like you figuring out how to work your program, and that's going to be unique for everybody. But you establishing a healthy support group. So with a friend group who understands and um, can learn to support you or does support you in this. So first and foremost is setting up your support system, getting good connection, having time out with that support system, It really is focusing on you. It's figuring out what are those things you wanted to do for a long time that you need to do for you, whether it's exercising, whether it's learning and studying and focusing on your intellectual growth, your therapeutic growth. One of the biggest mistakes I think partners make is they want the relationship so badly to work out that they focus their energy and attention on their partner's recovery, or the person struggling with the addiction on their recovery, and that is actually not what you want, right? You can look and see and ask to be a part of their recovery, but if you focus your attention on their recovery, you're going to miss out on all the things to help you stay stable. So I have what we call the dailies. It's focusing on your needs, physical needs, emotional needs, relational needs, and spiritual needs, focusing on those every day to have balance. It's learning tools to help you stay out of anxiety, out of depression, to help you learn to feel all of your emotions: sadness, anger, joy, fear. You want to learn how to feel all of that, share it with others. So, and then self-compassion is huge. You really need to do a lot of work on self-compassion. A lot of partners will want to blame themselves. This is my fault. I did something wrong, or I could have done this better. Maybe this wouldn't be a problem. So really focusing on and having self-compassion. Yeah, maybe you did do things wrong, but the truth is, like my little rant that I just had, he has to learn to own and be accountable regardless of what you may or may not have done in the relationship. So focusing on the self-compassion, focusing on the human connection, using tools and dailies. If you want me to get more specific about what your recovery looks like, maybe ask some other questions there, but that would be just like a broad overview. It's really focusing in on you and being in the partnership, but realizing that you said husband, his progress in this is going to have to be his. And talk about it. Talk about your fears around his recovery. Talk about your concerns, but telling him how he needs to do recovery, definitely what you got to stay away from. And that's a big thing I see that partners struggle with early on.
And my thought is, I think I'm so prodependent aligned that I struggle with the word recovery for partners. So because it's such an addict addiction word, but so if I look at what does healthy healing look like for you, I look at what do you need to do for self-care, and it isn't like Matt said, it's not focusing on what he's doing. Of course, you're looking for safety. You're looking for, how is he doing? Is he starting to show to be trustworthy? Love that he's got 90 days. Sounds like he's doing things. And I really love that you're noticing improvements in your relationship, because I hear all the time of like, he says he's stopped the behavior, but he's still blaming me, gaslighting me, and all of that. So this to me is like huge in progress and accountability, the responsibility, all of those things. That sounds like there's noticeable shifts. So that feels really good about, from that standpoint. But like Matt said, get support. We have drop-in groups, 3, 4 if you can count the old lady posse, but 3 betrayed partner groups every week for for partners. And then there's webinars, this one, but there's multiple every week. And they are, I have people that have, that just listen to a podcast every morning because they want to start off with, getting, some input, and I go, great. Or, bits of these, whatever is going to be helpful for you.
Yeah.
My amazing therapist during COVID, I have struggled. I'm going to be real honest. So,
Yeah.
she was like, you have to be intentional. And so I don't watch the news. I have an app that's I have a certain app. I have a certain uplifting publication that I read and this is how I start my day, and hit press on the coffee pot, but regardless, those are the things I do. And then I'm intentional about how I'm starting my day. I'm intentional about what I'm letting in to start with, and then I'm a whole lot better off, as I go into my day. So doing things that are self-care, and that that you are putting you and your self-care, as a priority, so that you have the bandwidth this is hard stuff.
Yeah,
So
it almost sounds funny, but make part of your recovery not focusing on recovery work.
yeah, yeah,
And I think sometimes I've had people that it's like they're so focused on which book they need to read next that I will actually say to people, why don't you read the Harry Potter series
yeah,
next? Like,
yes.
why don't you read something fun,
Go
right?
for a walk. Do, like, yes,
Yeah,
yeah,
like,
anything.
so I don't know if that totally applies here, but at the same time, don't be so narrowly recovery focused that you miss that recovery is actually learning to live differently in so many areas of our lives.
Yeah, yeah, and this takes over even for partners. This takes over both sides of it. So, okay, so next
Sure.
question. I agree with the bing, bing, bing of high numbing with the porn you are referencing. I noticed that I use online sexting with real women more than porn, but also found that events were a very big enough event. So I would make other things bigger and better. As I've worked my recovery over the past 2 years, I found that item for me personally seems to be because I wanted this huge high feeling, which is, yeah, sure,
Yep.
chasing dopamine, which then was too much, too many feelings, stress, overwhelming, etc. Then I would act out to numb those high feelings, and the acting out would make me feel bad. So then I would crash to super low levels of feeling sad, depressed, shameful. I felt like it was the super erratic heartbeat monitor, and I was trying
Uh-huh.
to soften those highs and lows to begin to feel my feelings as a husband addict, which is difficult, but working on it. So, how about feelings of highs and lows? What would you recommend to help bring those into a narrower band without the quick turnarounds, and allow yourself to understand feelings better? Great question.
Oh my gosh, it's such a good question. And it actually shows me that in your recovery work, you're really learning about your cycle and your pattern. You're learning really also about what your underlying needs are. And so it's honestly good job. Like it looks like to me, you've been putting in some really good work in your recovery to gain insight in this area. Um, this the learning to not need as high of highs or to have as low of lows, um, that is such a beautiful part of the recovery process. And to be honest, sometimes, so when we talk about somebody who's warming the seat in 12 step, sometimes warming the seat in 12 step allows us to learn to hear other people's highs and lows and learn to just become more tolerant of it, right? So there's lots of things like attending a 12-step meeting and learning just to be present with other people, learning to be present with our own emotions, learning to hear our spouse be crazy angry and hurt, and learning to let that be okay. Now, how to do all of this, some of it just comes through experience. It's learning to stand in your place and not run from difficult experiences, but not also have to chase higher experiences. So I do think it's important to enjoy some of the fun things in life. Me personally, man, I'm on the mountain bike trail as much as I can because it's a blast. Like, and it feels good. So finding healthy ways uh, to get some of those highs. The problem is that when you're used to the meth effect of porn, being on a mountain bike trail is going to feel boring, right? And so you have to learn to introduce these other things in your life and get a distance from those peaks that are unrealistic. Get some distance, so sobriety from those things, and then the other things as you introduce them consciously or intentionally, as you learn to be intentional, then you'll start to balance that out and feel more comfortable what would be a normal, healthy life. Um, as far as if bringing in a narrow band without the quick turnabouts or turnarounds. I have had some clients, honestly, that because they had been chasing the high and had such an imbalance for a while, I've encouraged them, see your physician, see specifically a psychiatrist, and see if some medication can help in the meantime for however long the psychiatrist and you determine, to help balance that out. I don't think we should be afraid to get medical help for the chemical imbalances that are going on in our brain, even if we caused them, if that makes sense. Not that we intentionally did, but our behavior did, right? I know that when somebody is coming off of alcohol, I don't remember the drug. There's a drug, if I remember right, that is used to help people come down off of alcohol. There's drugs that are used to help people come out off of narcotics. Sometimes we need that to help prevent these intense highs and lows. So I would look into that as well. So hopefully this gives you some things to explore and look at. Tammy, is there anything?
Well, yeah, and a qualified professional, because I think unfortunately GPs are quick to hand out just any old med to
Yeah,
do. So
that's why I started by saying talk to your physician and specifically a psychiatrist. Like, to be honest with you, I think especially when you're dealing with some pretty intense mental health issues, it's not like, hey, I'm having a rough time and we just had some tough stuff happen, and you just get a little help from your general practitioner. You're dealing with some major mental issues with addiction and everything else. So absolutely consult with a psychiatrist. Go to somebody who specializes in this. Um, for sure. So yeah, thank you, Tammy, for emphasizing that.
well, and I was the queen of the roller coaster. So like I was up and down and
Yeah,
up and down, and everything was high drama, or low drama or whatever. But
right.
and you know what? Part of it was time, and just giving yourself grace to know that this, I bet you're already seeing that the highs aren't as high, the lows aren't as low, and like it doesn't have to be, like I am more like this. My husband's more like this. I'm still more
Mhm.
like this, and I'm okay with that, but on the other hand, one of the things that was the most helpful for me was just owning it and talking about it. If I'm talking about, and then blah, 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 like it starts dissipating it, just, or the lows, like, they say a grief shared is halved and a joy shared is doubled, well,
Ah,
doing that type of thing where I'm connecting with other people and talking about, where I'm at feeling wise, and it helped normalize it. It's like, yep, you're okay. You are here in the moment. They help ground me. Just that kind of support, helped me through some of those massive times. But I completely numbed out. I hated all emotions when I first got into recovery. Somebody says, "So what are you feeling?" And I couldn't even name what I was feeling. I was so the good or the bad. So to be able to learn to tolerate the uncomfortability of emotions, was a challenge for me. So, but it did get better with time. So,
for sure.
okay. And somebody added, and I love this: I am a betrayed partner and have been in recovery for 2 years. For myself, I call it trauma recovery, and a trauma recovery plan. I love that, and I know that healing wounds, you recover from that. So I try to get over it, but it was like so codependent language, that, like I said, again, that's a I got to get over myself issue. So is there ever a time when a formal disclosure would not be recommended? As a recovering addict, I have decided that cornerstones of my recovery are accountability, honesty, and integrity. Yay. So
Yeah,
disclosure is a
good job.
no-brainer, although very scary, understandably. Other addicts in my fellowship have never done formal disclosure, citing that it would be too hurtful or harmful to their partner. Is disclosure always recommended or no?
Great question. So let me speak to first. If I hear an addict, somebody struggling with addiction, if they tell me it's too painful, it's too harmful, my first question is, how did you determine that? Right? Because that to me sounds like somebody who wants to hide and not want doesn't want to face. It'd be I I would actually say, really? To you? Too hurtful to you? Too harmful to you? Or too harmful to your partner? Who are we talking about here? Really, which would be me kind of jabbing a little bit to say, who are you protecting? You, her, or him? Both, right? Um, because, and then I would say, who helped you come to that determination? Right? Was it somebody else who also doesn't want to tell their partner? Or was it a trained professional, somebody who knows what they're doing in this area? Because the truth is, the disclosure is really up to the partner, right? They're the ones that have been lied to. Now, there are certain situations where a disclosure wouldn't be appropriate. And I'll give you a few. I don't immediately have a list of all of them. But if I have a spouse or a partner who has said, I'm divorcing you, then I will tell the person struggling with addiction, you are not going to do any sort of a disclosure, right? Because at that point, we're not trying to repair a relationship. And it may work in a way against the person to do the disclosure. And so I will say, if they're asking for a divorce, then we're not doing a disclosure. Another situation is, let's say I have a partner who has terminal cancer, right? We have to ask ourselves, what are we doing a disclosure for, right? Do we want to disclose that? Now, if the partner is asking for it, then we're going to work through that and figure out what's best. If I have somebody that comes in and says, hey, I'm struggling with addiction, and I just found out that my partner has terminal cancer, and I don't know whether or not I should share. It's a great question. We're going to spend a bit of time on this to figure out, what is it that you need? What is it that they need? Can you recover from this by not disclosing? And so with the help of a competent professional, we are going to be exploring it. Now, at the same time, with that being said, I think other than extreme cases, and I don't know that divorce is an extreme case, but other than extreme cases, disclosure is always necessary. So I just told you, it's, for the most part, you have to do a disclosure. If nothing else, I would encourage someone to do a formal disclosure with a close friend, right? So if you're not going to do it with your spouse for whatever reason, even if let's say you're in addiction recovery, I would encourage you to do a formal disclosure, even if you're not married. Find somebody who you can do a formal disclosure with and really open up about everything, and not necessarily the fourth step, right? But a properly done formal disclosure. But hopefully that gives you some idea that, yes, it's not always appropriate formal disclosure. The situations typically tend to be rare, with the exception of divorce. And I would be challenging that person how they came to that conclusion, and if they're really just trying to protect themselves with addiction behavior.
Yes, because except when to do so would injure them or others. And it's really easy to go, oh, well, it's definitely, I know it's going to hurt them. Well, of course it's going to hurt them. It's also going to clear the slate and help you have a foundation of trust. And your question was, when a formal disclosure. So thank you for asking that, because that's guided by professionals. I get all
Yes.
the time where I told her everything, and I was like, and she didn't know what was coming. She didn't have support. It was just like, and so now you've extra traumatized her. You didn't have the support to help you guide your process as to what details are absolutely imperative to share and what wasn't. So I mean, a formal disclosure is it's a very specific process of, and it's not, every little gory detail. It's, so I agree. It's really get professional guidance on this. If you're looking to repair the relationship, then and the person is physically and mentally stable to be able to take that in, and there's not a divorce pending, then a disclosure is how you build trust. So
Yeah.
next question. Can a regular psychologist without a sex addiction certification diagnose poor impulse controlled obsessive compulsive behavior?
I mean, technically, I believe any psychologist could diagnose that, as I think most psychotherapists as well. But for me, if I have a suspicion that somebody has, that I have obsessive compulsive behavior or a family member does, then I'm going to go find somebody who specializes in that. And so for me, you say regular psychologist. Well, most psychologists, psychotherapists, uh, it, I mean, there's plenty of general practitioners out there, but if I have something such as an obsessive compulsive disorder, I'm going to go find somebody who specializes in it, who makes that their specialty. That's the thing they study and they love, because I don't want just anybody diagnosing that. So that would be, hopefully that answers your question. I would definitely find somebody who specializes in that, and I would call them and ask them before, say, hey, can you do a 15-minute consult before I book an appointment? Is this something you feel comfortable diagnosing? Is this something you're equipped to diagnose? Do you know a therapist or a psychologist who is better at diagnosing this particular issue? So hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, and with we don't have someone on staff at Seeking Integrity Los Angeles, but we do have somebody that is fantastic that we work with that understands addiction and all of this other. So having that guideline that they because it's really easy to give pills to cover up symptoms that are addiction, so you really want to have the ability to understand that. So the final question we've got, it's a little longer. If I feel like I don't really need a support group, I have a therapist and close supportive friends, including one going through a similar situation. That sounds like support to me. Am I in some kind of denial? Now that my husband is in his active recovery, I'm feeling more relaxed about it while I still feeling and processing the feelings that come up. However, his CSAT, the one who is not giving us a date for formal disclosure, is suggesting that I need to do more work on my recovery. This word and suggestion triggered me the same way it does me. I went to support groups last week on his recommendation, his saying that my therapist and I should be driving the formal disclosure process has me frustrated and also second guessing myself. My therapist, a psychologist and LMFT, is not a CSAT. I have also been very straightforward with his therapist from the beginning, have been open about my feelings and expectations about what I want to feel safe. Thoughts on that? That's
Okay. So whether or not you need a formal support group as a like in like a 12 step or that sort of thing, that's a tough one, because I mean, honestly, when you said his therapist is telling me I need to work more on my recovery, man, that would really frustrate me if I was told that by somebody else's therapist.
who
I
doesn't work
realize
with me.
who doesn't
So
work with me, right? It's like, oh, thank you for telling me what I
yeah, yeah.
need. Even though, and what I would imagine his therapist is actually saying, which is actually really good. And he's saying, I'm worried about you. I care about you and your husband, and I want to see you guys be healthy and well. And so I'm nervous as a clinician proceeding with this without there being, we're as CSATs, we're big on support group. We know how important that is. And if your therapist, who you say is a psychologist and an LMFT, is not a CSAT, maybe there's some fear on his part that it's not being pushed hard enough. Well, the truth is his therapist might have to work through that fear. And let's say, for instance, you aren't, that you're not in a place that you should be, then we're going to discover that after disclosure comes out, if that makes sense. And so his therapist probably just has to trust that you and your therapist have it covered. Now, my guess is if your therapist is a psychologist and an LMFT, MFTs are really good at understanding human connection. And so if if you feel comfortable with your therapist, I would certainly trust that that, hey, you're in an okay place. Let's go ahead and move forward. And if I need more support after disclosure, then I have a 12-step group that I've identified, and I'm going to go to it, right? And I don't think there's anything wrong with having that in the plan, so that if things go awry, you're ready. You know where it's at. You know the time it meets. Maybe you've even talked to somebody who's in that group so that they're ready for you, if that makes sense. But yeah, I would encourage you, trust your process, trust your therapist. And if you don't feel like you need a formal 12-step support group, then that's the decision you're going to make. And if that turns out to be not the best decision, then you'll change when you realize it. And so unfortunately, it almost feels like some management of your recovery is going on. And that would annoy and bother me, but I also would probably see that it's coming from a place of genuine love and concern. And love and concern never bothers me. I always
Yeah.
like it when people love and are concerned about me. So
Yeah.
hopefully that helps.
Yeah. But I hear, I mean, I can't tell you how many people I talk to that like they're so isolated and they don't have, they don't have anyone that they can talk to. So I hear you have your own posse of
Yeah.
people. Great, so
Oh, for sure.
so yeah, so I would trust your gut. You said I'm second guessing myself. Trust your gut, just
Yeah.
and tell the therapist, thank you, I appreciate that. I'm going to continue to get my support. I got
And,
this.
and
So
and then just know that if you get it wrong, just own it. Hey, you know what? You were probably right. That's probably what I needed. And I'm
yeah,
so glad I have one now. Right.
yeah,
Like, I think you going and doing it just to appease somebody else may not be that good. So
yeah, yeah, I agree.
good,
So
good questions, guys. This was
yes, yes, yes. It was lovely to see you. Thank you all for
lovely.
participating today. Really appreciated that. So we'll be. I have to look at the schedule. I don't even know what the.
We are going to be back in January
There you go.
because I think it ends up on a holiday or
Yeah,
something.
yeah. Oh, it does. It does. It has to be either Christmas or
It,
New.
it was
Yeah, yeah.
it was going
You're
to end
right.
up on Christmas, and
Yeah, we're
I
not
love
doing
you
that.
guys. I'm not doing that.
Yeah, yeah. Neither am I, and neither is Scott. So yes, we'll see you in January. Watch the events calendar, and you'll see it. So thank you. Thanks for a great year too. Thanks
Yes,
everybody.
you guys are awesome. Good to see
Bye
you.
bye.